this is Stephanie Ortega, and you're listening to the Remix Movement Podcast. Hello, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Remix Movement. I'm so happy to be doing another episode with you. And I told you in our last episode that we had a special treat because we're doing a remix interview today. So before we get into talking to our interviewer, I just want to recap what we talked about in our last episode, episode 59. Lewis and I had a conversation with regards to tithes and offering, and just with regards to how we give God our money. And we talked a little bit about what are the reasons as to why it's just really hard for some people to trust God with their money. The episode's challenge was to start treasuring God more with your money, beginning this next paycheck that you're going to be getting by giving your tithes and offerings. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that episode, definitely check it out. It was a very good episode. Now, with regards to this episode, we're doing a remix interview with Will Thomas, and it's called Beyond the Music. I want to say thank you so much to Will for just being able to go on the phone with us and talk to us. Will is a good friend of mine. He is a worship leader at CityLift Church in Oakland Park. This guy plays the keyboard, the piano, the guitar. He sings. He's a little bit of everything. And we're going to talk about worship today. We're going to talk about how it goes beyond the music. So, Will, go ahead and say hello to all of our listeners.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How are you?
All right. Thank you so much again for just taking the time to be able to do this. I know I haven't seen you physically in a while, but thank God we have technology and we're able to talk to each other on the phone and on WhatsApp and be able to see each other on Sundays. Our church at CityLift does Zoom groups or Zoom church on Zoom on Sundays. So I still get to see Will and we still get to talk to him. So that's really cool to have him on our episode today. So, Will, just to crack open a few details about yourself, okay? How old are you?
I am 29 years young.
Woo!
29 years young.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this is my last year of my 20s. It went by super fast and I wasn't ready. When I was like 24, I was like, man, 30's just a long way away. And then like you take two blinks and now you're 29. And you're just like, where did my 20s go? But it's been really, really cool. It's been really, really cool. So 29 years old.
Hey, that's awesome. So when do you turn 30 though?
Next May. So May 24th. So my birthday is around Memorial Day. So like around that weekend. So that usually is just a crazy, crazy time because it's like right before like school gets out.
Yeah.
And so, like, you're just trying to figure out, okay, how. So, like, I have a nephew who's he just turned 4, and so, like, usually that's around the time where I'm just like, all right, I got to plan everything around his schedule now because, like, I'm just trying to spend as much time with him as possible. So.
Aw, well, hey, I think 20s are great and 30s will be better. It's nothing but a number, okay?
Yeah.
You are going to be the same person with the same attitude and fresh life, and God is going to continue to bless you, and I know that. But you have a long weekend for your birthday, just like Lewis, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Lewis's birthday is around 4th of July, so, like, we always get, like, that holiday weekend. And for you, you get Memorial Day weekend, so you get, like, a 4-day weekend kind of thing.
Wait, so when is Lewis's birthday?
His birthday is the day after 4th of July.
That's crazy. So my sister's birthday is July 6th.
You see? So she probably celebrates the same way. She probably has like a whole like 4-day weekend for her birthday.
Yeah. So like, and the crazy story about that is like her due date was actually July 4th.
No way.
It was supposed to be the 4th of July, but she was late.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Was she late by a lot or no?
Oh, she was. They told my mom, I think she was supposed to be born July 1st, and then they were like, no later than July 4th, and then she stayed an extra 2 days.
Okay.
And then,
okay.
Yeah, so she didn't waste her time.
I know, right? But that's still super cool, though. That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to hit you with 2 more questions. What is your relationship status, and how are you dealing with the coronavirus pandemic?
my relationship status. I am a single man, a single black man in
Woo!
America. Yeah. So, been single for a while, but like it's been really cool. Everyone keeps asking me like, "Hey, like when are you gonna settle down?" And I'm just like, I don't know. I actually like my singleness. It's probably the most fun I've had. Um, just doing stuff that I want to do. Like for example, I'm a big like lover of sneakers,
Mm-hmm.
and so I spend I don't spend a ridiculous amount of money on sneakers, but I spend a good amount of money on sneakers. And if I was in a relationship, I probably couldn't.
No.
so
Bro, don't even
so
say that.
I mean, I probably couldn't. But hey, so but it's been really really cool. Um, I just this period of life and just trying like enjoying my singleness has been one of the coolest things for me. It's gotten to let me know myself,
Yeah.
know like what I want, what I don't want, um, what I feel is like necessary, and so it's been really really cool. Your other question, how are you dealing with the coronavirus pandemic? So I don't know if anybody else's answers that you've interviewed before,
Mm-hmm.
but I've actually felt like this was so needed for me.
Okay.
Um, Everything is so fast paced in life, just
Yeah.
in life in general. And for the first time ever in my like lifetime, even in my parents' lifetime, everything slowed down or everything
Mm-hmm.
stopped. So for me, it's been really really cool. So like during the time, um, I was just a piano player. I just sang, and I don't know if you know this, but like it wasn't until maybe like 2 weeks before Christmas that I picked up a guitar. So
Oh,
like
I had no idea.
yeah, so like even if you saw me at church playing guitar like in December and January, I was only playing for like 2 3 weeks.
You look
So
like you know what you're doing though, Will. Like when you're in praise and worship, you are jamming and I'm right there clapping my hands. I'm with you. I would have never known that.
no, so I picked up a guitar like at the end of last year. Um, like it was, and it was funny because it was our pastor, Pastor Matt. So like he came to me and he was like, "Hey, we need a guitar player," and I was like, "I don't know, I got an acoustic at home." He was like, "All right, cool, like bring it." And so I brought it one week. I played like one song. I was absolutely terrible. Um, to the point where I told Dan, our sound engineer, I told him like, "Hey, don't have me in the house. Like, it's really, really bad." And then like 2 weeks later, I was just like, "Okay, I kind of have a feel for it," and then just continually trying to get better. And that's what the break has given me. It's given me time to get better. I went from that, so now like I edit videos.
Mm-hmm.
So like our worship on like when we were doing church online, I was editing worship videos. So like planning the sets, like recording them, then taking them home, doing that, and then trying to learn how to mix, trying to do video editing. Got into like camera work and video shooting, and just I've just been a sponge basically these last 4 months. Well, not even four. It's almost been six,
It's
but like
almost, yeah. It
yeah.
feels
So
like
like
all of 2020 has just been the pandemic.
yeah. So yeah, but I've been a sponge, and it's been oddly satisfying. Trying to slow down.
That's
It
really
took
good.
it took some time, and I think like I've had high seasons and I've had lows, like everyone else has. But my lows haven't been as long as I thought they would be. They'd be like maybe 2 or 3 days, and they're just more so like, I don't know if I want to get out of bed today. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can wake up at 9, but I can also sleep until 11:30 or noon and just doing that. So like it's given me some time to just be like, hey, like what are some of the things that you've always said, man, I wish I had time to do. If I had the time to do it, I would learn this, or I would pay more attention to this. And so I took I maybe like the first week when we first initially shut down in March, I took a week just to myself, just to like, hey, like I'm gonna rest, like I'm gonna play video games. I don't play video games that much. I'm gonna take a week. I'm gonna take a week and play video games, and I'm gonna take a week and just like cook for the first time in a while.
That's so
just
cool.
different things. And it kind of let me slow down. And then after I took a week off, I was just like, all right, cool. Like I have my balance. I know that like it's not going to be as fast paced, which was great for me because it allowed me to still do some of the things that like I wanted to learn and some of the things that I was passionate about. But it also gave me time to like relax. It gave me time to like not worry about, hey, I got to plan a month ahead because I didn't know. So I'm very big on like getting stuff done and getting all these things planned for the future. And for the first time, it was just like, hey, man, like you just got to take it day by day. Like the most you can take it is week by week.
Yeah.
And so that was for me just amazing. It allowed me to spend some more time with God when you're getting so busy. And it's crazy because people assume that like, oh, you're a worship leader, so like you're always in your Bible. I'm not always in my Bible. I'm not always reading a word. Like even on Sundays, like Sundays are so crazy. Before we moved to the new location, Sundays were I wake up at 5, literally pack all my stuff, go over, I walked into the auditorium. The call time was at the time was 8.
Yeah,
I was getting to the auditorium.
Morning, I remember that.
Yeah, I was getting to the auditorium at 6:45, 7.
Yeah.
And just spending time like, hey, trying to get some stuff set up. And then like I'd be like, oh crap, I haven't even prayed. I haven't even said anything. Like, let me just like put something on, or let me just like read a quick devotional to make sure that like I quote unquote met my spiritual quota for the day before I had to go lead worship. And so after all that, and now it's to the point where like, hey, like you can take your time, and it's cool because now like I'm not rushing God.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like you get in this moment where like, hey, I got to wake up at 5, but in this 30 minutes, like this is what God's going to get in 30 minutes. And then I got to go get ready for work, and I got to go do this, and I got to go do that. And I got to go prep food for the day or for the week. I'm not in a rush to get into the presence of God.
Yeah.
So like that's probably been the biggest thing. And so it's given me so much joy in the sense of, man, what was I doing when life was so busy that I couldn't spend time with God? And now like I get to spend all this time with God, and like I'm super happy, but I'm also upset at myself because I was like, man, I was missing out because I was just so busy and so like taken up with just so much of the task.
Yeah.
So that's been really, really cool. So the pandemic has been oddly comforting.
It's a very different
weird
answer compared to all the other interviews we've had. We've had interviews where I know that when we spoke to Martin, and we talked about fatherhood, he was saying, man, the pandemic is just like, I have no job, I have kids I got to take care of. And it was just like something that we were like, oh my God, what's going on? And when we spoke to Sarah, she was like, I'm just trying to get everything together. We're trying to figure out, how do I move forward? What's going to happen next? And hearing your perspective is just so refreshing because it's a different perspective. It gives you an idea to be able to say, you know what? I can only get better. And now that I have all this time, and now that I have, everything slowing down, I can be able to spend more time with him. And the same thing goes for your singleness. I know you said that like, when am I going to settle down? It's not about settling down so much. It's just about when you're single, you're investing in your passions. You're investing in what you love. You're investing in the things that you like. And then when you find someone who you find commonalities with, that you find interesting, and you want to continue to spend that time with, then they join you in your passions. They may not share the same passions, but they're there with you, supporting you in your passions. And hey, you want to spend that money on your shoes? If the woman of God who's going to be with you is okay with that and she, gives you a budget, maybe she likes shoes too, you can do it together.
Exactly.
But
I need you to tell that to my mom when my mom's like, "Hey, when are you gonna settle down?" I'm gonna be like, "Well, Stephanie told me this, that, and the other, and like
it
that I should go
does.
to this."
Yeah, no, I'm
So
being serious. It takes time. I mean, we're going to talk to one of my friends in the next few weeks. It's an interview on singleness, and she's just like you. She wants to be able to enjoy her singleness. She wants to do the things that she likes, and she's not rushing herself to settle down or feel like, oh, well, I have to get to a certain time frame so that I can feel this way. It's not,
yeah,
it doesn't just happen like that, It happens when God decides it to happen, and you just never know who that person's gonna be. I promise you, I didn't know it was gonna be Lewis. But Lewis likes shoes too, and once in a while he'll buy them, and I'll be like, okay, cool, and he'll buy me nice shoes, and it's not what I love, but I know he likes it. But you work together in that, so I mean that's fine. I will have a conversation with your mom whenever you want.
thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. I appreciate that.
So getting into worship, all right? You are a worship leader, and I know this, and you know this, and now our listeners know this. And I didn't know about the guitar. I didn't know that you had just started learning. I think you had told me before when you had come to my house that you were into piano when you were younger.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
played the keyboards, and that's something that you've just continued to do. And I know, which I was a little shocked about, that you enjoy playing keyboard more than you like singing. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, like that was for me a little bit shocking because I was like, no, but Will, you're so good at both of them.
Yeah. I enjoy um, being in the background. It's one of those things that um, I've had to learn how to balance.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, so I've been playing piano since I was 5 years old.
Oh
Since I
wow.
was 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I took like a little break in middle school because my sister quit, and I was like, I don't want to do it. How come I'm the only one that has to do it? And when I came back, like my music teacher at the time, she literally called my parents every week for a year. I think for like a year and a half, she called every week
Wow.
and was like, "Hey, like he needs to be here."
Persistent, man.
Yeah, like he needs to be here, and like I didn't understand at the time, so she was a believer as well. And so she was like, "He needs to be here. It's important. It's 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 gonna shape his life." And I was just like, "No, it's not. She don't know." And so, lo and behold, it's my passion now. But I enjoy being in the background, and it's a weird concept. Why? Um, and it's for me. I've always been taught to be humble and be like just like be humble and enjoy like everything that you've been given because it's not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things is that I it's a part of me that's like an internal struggle as a worship leader, and it may not be for everyone, but it's a pride issue. So like every time you're up front, like people are just like, hey, like that person, Will is the worship leader. So like when I see Will, this has to happen. If Will's not there, like if you've grown up in like church culture, you'll see it sometimes where they're just like, oh, this worship leader is not here today, so I'm not going to be there.
They
And
do that
like,
with pastors too, man. I don't
yeah,
understand it, but they do that
yeah,
too.
right. And so like it can be like, hey man, hey, like that's not the reason why we do that. But
Mm-hmm.
also like I'm human. So like it's nice to know that someone says like, hey man, like I showed up because of you.
Yeah.
Well thank you. Like that's cool. But I also struggle with that and with pride where I'm just like, I'd rather play keys because if I'm playing keys, I'm in the background
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to worry about like the other stuff. Like I'm supporting someone else. So like my piano playing, my guitar playing, it's pushing someone else up to the forefront.
Yeah.
Um, while I get to sit in the back, and it doesn't cause the tension that's within that. And so yeah, if you had told me for the rest of my life, hey, you just have to be a musician, I would have been like, yes. Oh my God, yeah.
You can still do that. I know.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, a thousand times over, I would pick playing keys over singing. And it's more my element because it's what I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was leading worship at when was I leading worship? I wasn't even leading worship. So growing up, I was playing keys. So I was quote unquote the music director for my parents' church when I was 14 years old.
Music director. So that's just playing the keys and then making sure that everything is in accordance or picking the songs like.
Yes.
Okay, so just making sure that the music was on point, people showed up to do what they had to do, and
right.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, but I was 14 years old. So if you tell a 14-year-old like, hey, like this is your job, and like you're in charge of music for the entire church. So whether that's little kids, youth, young adults, and just like main services, like you're in charge of that. I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
There was just certain things that I just didn't know, and there were certain things that like I probably wasn't ready for. Where people are just like, "Hey, like we need this, that, and the other," and I was like, "Well, I got algebra homework, so no." Yeah, like I got algebra homework. I still want to be a kid. Like I still want to be a teenager, and like that was my life. That was my life, and I was like, man. I'm not even a pastor's child. Like, I don't even know how pastor kids do it.
I will tell you how that goes when you're done.
Yeah. And for me, I struggled with that all throughout high school. Like, it was just a pride issue.
Wow.
So, like, to the point where, when I went to school, I went to Highlands Christian Academy in Deerfield.
Okay.
For high school. My high school didn't know that I was a musician until my senior year, halfway through my senior year.
Because they didn't go to church?
No, it wasn't because they didn't go to church. They didn't go to my church, but like I just didn't let people know that because I was like, I don't want to deal with what that comes with.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until our graduation night that half my class found out I played keys. Mm-hmm. And so like I had to play for like they did like a special song, and like I had to play for like the rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And they were just like, wait, you can do this?
Surprise.
Like you can read music? And I was like, well, yeah. They were just like, but how? And I was like, well, I'm kind of the music director at my church. And they were just like, but you're 17. I was like, yeah, I know, it's crazy. Yeah, and so that was something that I struggled with to the point where, like, so basically, I've been a part of ministry since I was 14 years old. Wow. Like that's all I've been doing. This is the only thing I know. And one of the crazy parts was when I went away to college my freshman year. For the first semester of my freshman year, that fall semester, I wasn't in any ministries because I just wanted a chance to be quote unquote normal. That was something I was struggling with. I struggled with that, and I struggled with like pride. So I was just like, well, if I'm not doing anything, I guess like that kind of like eased it for a bit until like God was like nudging at me to be like, hey, I've called you to something, mm-hmm. and I don't care if like it makes you uncomfortable. Like I've called you to it, and that part for me was just like, man, I didn't even know how to navigate all that, even at a young age. Like I got a lot better handle of it now, but I'm still learning every day. But me at 14, like in my formative years, 14, 15, 16, like there was nothing you could tell me. Mm-hmm. Like that was the part of pride that they were just like, hey, we want to do this. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound good because well, I'm the director. So like, let's go with this.
So let me ask you another question.
That's what I struggled with.
How did you go from music director to worship leader? Like when did that transition take place? Because that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. So from music director to worship leader, probably came back after I came back from college. So I went to college and I lived in Michigan for 5.5 years. Um, and it was something that was very, very important for me as my growth as a person. Um, just just living on my own, kind of dealing with um, life as an adult for the first time. Um, and I think moving back, it's it was a crazy story. So I moved back in like the end of 2013, 2014. And after I moved back, I just wanted to be a musician, and so I found a church out in Coral Springs, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
called Life Fellowship. And it was so I grew up Seventh Day Adventist as well. I don't know if I mentioned that I grew up Seventh Day Adventist.
Okay.
Um, and so all I all I got to be was a musician, and it was amazing. It was the best time of my life. They're just like, hey, show up, play, and just you don't have to do anything else but to play. And I was like, oh, I can do that. I can play my life away. Like that's not even a problem. So that's what I was doing for about 6 months, and one day and partially it's my fault. It's well, God called me to it, but also it was my fault. So I was backstage one day and I was humming a song, and like I was singing to myself, and someone overheard me.
God heard you. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
and someone overheard me singing. Um, and they went to the worship leader at the time. They were just like, "Oh my gosh, Will can sing, and he sounds amazing. And we got to get him on stage." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. I am a musician. That is all I am. That is the seat that God has me in." And like, it was crazy because I was just using, well, God hasn't called me to that. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm just a musician. I can
Mm-hmm.
hold a note. That's fine. Um, and one day they were just like, all right, just give us this. If you lead out one song out of the set of like, we did like 5 or 6 songs that day. He was like, if you can lead out one song, like that's all we're asking for. And they were like, you can pick any song you want. And I was just like, okay, it's just a one time thing. Yeah, it's only one time. That's all you have to do. So go out. Um, they and it was so much. It was so extra. Like we were sitting there and like I had played like 2 songs into the set, so I was supposed to do the third song of the set. Um, so they do this whole thing and they're setting up the song, and then they were like, well, our like church lingo, our brother Will is gonna come up and he's gonna lead us in worship, and like all and like the entire church looks like, what are you talking about? So around that time when I moved back, I didn't really fit into a community, and that was more my fault because like I just wasn't giving community a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a place I wanted to be and I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I wanted to live like I still wanted to be in Michigan, but I had to come back home, and that's where like I was called back home, and so I was just like, I don't talk to anybody. I don't know anybody. Everyone's looking around like, why are you giving this kid a chance? Like he hasn't said a word since we met him. And I'd been at the church for 6 months, and so like I I lead the song. I lead the song, and like it like I when God like moved in a room,
Yep.
um, God moved in a room, and all of a sudden I was just like, okay, cool. I was done. Like the song ended, I was good to go. I was like, all right, cool. Thanks, guys. You may be seated. Thanks for worshiping with us. And like worship leaders, and then the worship leader who was in charge, her name's Carlisa. And she's been like super big in my life, Carlisa Waters, and her husband Ashley. They were kind of like mentors to me when I moved back down here. They were just like, oh, well, actually, hey, So like I'm walking back, and then she's like, "Hey, Will, can you just stay up here and like lead the rest of the set?" And so now I'm in a position where I can't say no because who says
Everybody's
no to
watching.
everyone's watching, and who says no to someone that asks you, "Hey, lead people into the presence of God?" And I'm just
Exactly.
like, and so I'm just like, if I say no, I'm a jerk.
It almost
So
sounds
now
like it
like
was
I'm
a test from God.
yeah, and so I ended up leading the rest of the set. And then the next week they were just like, "Hey, well, the song you sang is new, and so we have to sing it again. But now it's kind of your song, so now like you have to lead it again." And I was just like, "Well, that's not what we discussed." And lo and behold, it went from that to like leading once a month, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was leading all the time.
Yeah.
And by the time I was like, when it was like, by the time it was like 2015, I was like a co-worship leader, and
Okay.
I was playing music less and less, and I was just like, man, I really miss playing the piano. This would be great if I could just play the piano. And it was God always like, nah, like there's more. There's more for
Exactly.
you. I need to pull something out of you, and it's not in the sense that like God doesn't know what He's placed on the inside of you, but
Mm-hmm.
with things that with the things of God, there's certain things that you have to exercise and you have to work out, and there's certain
Exactly.
things that you have to like strengthen. And it was possibly it was the craziest time because I didn't understand it, and the part that was crazy for a lot of people were just like, man, like you're impacting people, like
Mm-hmm.
you're impacting lives, and it wasn't something I wanted to do the entire time. Like I was doing it, and I was doing it because like I felt like, hey, God's asking me to do it, but I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And that's why certain people can tell. So when people see me just playing instruments, they're just like, man, you really love doing that. And I was like, yeah, I do. And when I'm leading worship, it's just like, man, do you absolutely love it? I've grown to love it. I've grown to um, appreciate it more. Just the whole community aspect of worship, but growing up and going from that transition from musician to like worship leader was possibly the some of the toughest spiritually that I've ever dealt with,
Yeah.
honestly.
And you were so young because the truth is that God calls and you're supposed to answer the call. And sometimes he calls you at a young age and you just have to step up, right? And
Yeah,
I can tell you, because I'm a PK, pastor's kid, for those who don't know. What happens is, like, I started praise and worship. My dad had a church and there was nobody else to do the praise and worship. So
yeah,
it was kind of like, okay, well, babe, you sing, so can you please go ahead and do it? And I was just like you. I wanted to be in the background. So first it was just my sister and we were literally just singing the songs and reading the words, and that's it. And then it got to the point where more people joined, and they're like, okay, well, now, Stephanie, we need you to lead it. And being a leader is not an easy job because not only do you have to select the songs, make sure the rehearsals are done, but you also have to make sure that everybody understands what worship is. And not everybody understands what worship is. They think that worship is just, well, let me get one of our Christian music songs, let me just go ahead and read the words and play my instrument, and we'll call it a day. But that's definitely not what it is, right?
yeah,
Worship goes above and beyond that. And we talked about it in our last Sunday service for CityLift, and I had no idea they were going to talk about it, is that worship is a way for us to be able to gratify who Christ is and to be able to share with him how much we appreciate who he is and what he does. It allows us to be able to praise him not only with our voice, but with other ways to be able to get into that worship where God's presence can move, where he can transform hearts, he can break any type of like illnesses that are in anybody's bodies, remove any evil spirits, and be able to just transform the people who come to church, the people who may be on the other side of whatever issues they're going through. Worship breaks those and allows them to be vulnerable in God's presence. So
yeah.
it goes beyond the music. I wanna talk to you a little bit more about that, right? So
Okay.
how do you tell people what worship is without telling them that it's just play a song and sing the words. Like how do you explain to people what true worship is?
Okay. This is like I can talk about this for like 4 hours. So like if I'm long winded, I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if you had a time limit or anything. So, worship is probably one of my favorite subjects, and it's simply because I I have this like burden on my heart, like that like maybe it wasn't until I want to say there was I can actually tell you the day. So 2018, it was like the last day of 2018, like
Okay.
New Year's Eve, and I was in this spot where I was friendships. I was losing friendships. I was not where I wanted to be. Um, I was supposed to be graduating like college, and I wasn't walking, so I had to like my college like graduation got delayed, and I was like, man, I was doing all that plus the church had just launched, and I was still trying to figure out like, hey, how do I do this to make sure that like I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that we are reaching who we need to reach.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I remember, like I was sitting and I was praying, and I was sitting and praying, and I was like, God, I don't know, like this is this seems like this can't work. It seems impossible. Like what there's something that Pastor Matt always says, and it's funny, but it's also true, where he says if we're looking at it from our earthly perspective, if we're looking at it from a human perspective, what we're doing is impossible. Like, hey, like preaching the gospel to make sure that everyone is reached.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. And it wasn't until I was praying that I literally heard God. And I heard him in like just like a small voice, like it was like a whisper. And he asked me a question. And in that question, it was like, do you love me? That's the question he asked me. So like I'm asking him, like, hey God, like I don't know how to make this work. I don't know how to do anything. And the question he asked me was, do you love me? And I'm like, of course I do. Why would you ever ask me that? Like almost like an offense where I was like, how could you ask me that? Of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the question. And then I didn't hear from him again for like a month. And the next time I heard from him, it was like, do you love me? And I was like, man, you keep asking me this question. Of course I do. Of course I do. And it wasn't until I was watching a sermon. I was watching a sermon because I was just like, man, like I was going through it, and I was just like, man, I just need some time to like to spend with Jesus. And I don't know if I have enough strength to read the Bible by myself. Let me just put on a sermon. And lo and behold, sermon title was about worship. And the question was, do you love God?
Dang.
When it came to worship.
Revelation.
And I was like, oh, you've been trying to get me here. Okay. And literally after that, like he's explaining certain things about worship that like, of course I've heard my entire life, but it dawned on me. We are people who believe in Christ and go to heaven. Like when he comes back and like all that happens, the only thing we're ever going to do in heaven is worship him.
Yep.
Like that's it. Like forever we will worship him.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the opportunity right now more than ever to worship God like we'll never get to worship him again.
Here on earth.
Because when will there be sickness? When will there be a pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
When will there be death in heaven? There won't be. You have an opportunity right now to worship him more than at more than anything right now. And it dawned on me. I was like, well, we don't know how to worship. So now, like, the burden on my heart is like, hey, I got to teach people how to worship, because what we do here is practice for what we're going to do forever.
Yeah.
And so going from that perspective, it changed a lot of things. So then I've had to, so like to answer your question, you're like, hey, what is worship? Worship isn't, here's what worship is not. Let's go there. Worship is not a song. It's not a tempo.
Yeah.
Because what we'll do is that, like, the fast songs are the praise songs and the slow songs are the worship songs, right?
Yeah.
So once you do that, you've only allowed that you can only worship God in a slow song.
Mm-hmm.
You've now allowed that, like, my parents, when I grew up in my parents' church, all we had was a piano and an organ, and we only sang hymns.
That's
and
it.
So growing up, so like when like Kirk Franklin came out and Fred Hammond and all these other guys and artists were coming out, and I was just like, man, this is amazing. My parents were like, no, that's not worship. So then it kind of put me in this box where, like, my parents were like, hey, if it doesn't sound like this and what I'm comfortable with, then it's not worship. And so I was just like, well, no, like, God can worship through anything.
Yep.
God can be worshiped through anything. And so it dawned on me that, like, man, like, we really don't know what true worship is. We don't know how to, and we don't know what it is. And so, like, that kind of put that burden on me where I was just like, hey, for as long as I'm running at this, like, we're gonna teach people how to worship. Like, that's the goal. And the main thing for me is that like, worship doesn't involve anything with me. And by that I'm saying that, like, when we're praying to God, when we pray to God, it benefits me. It benefits him because we're in relationship with him, but it benefits me as well. So, like, even when I'm giving in tithe, like you talked about tithe last week.
Yeah.
When you're giving in tithe, it still benefits you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, church services, they benefit you because now you're in community with other believers.
Yeah.
Like, worship doesn't benefit us at all. It's all for him.
All for the glory of God. Yeah.
Yes. It's at the end of it, like, worship's been going on long before we were born, long before the creation of the world, and it will go on forever.
Yep.
It'll literally go on forever, and it has nothing to do with us. And so I think that's where people get misconstrued with things, where they just don't know, and they'll just say, like, hey, I look up this verse the other day where it was like, praise you the Lord, and, like, it's giving you action. Like, and one of the things with worship, it was just like, when the angels are worshiping, they're crying holy. They're not singing holy, they're crying holy, which means they're crying or shouting it out. Yeah. Which means it's not music. It has nothing to do with music. So that means at my job, I can worship God in what I'm doing well, in doing it in excellence.
Come on.
And if I'm in my marriage, and if you're in a marriage, like, you can worship God through your marriage by giving everything you have and choosing your partner every single day. Like, there's different avenues to worship him rather than just putting him, but because all you've done is, if you can only worship with music on, you've already put him in a box. That means God can only show up when there's music around.
Yes.
God can only show up when there's song lyrics being made. Like, that's not the only time God shows up.
Right? Oh my God, that's so good, because it just reminds me, like, you worship God when you give your tithes and offering. You worship God when you speak truth to others about who Christ is. You worship God when you're in corporate worship on Sundays. You worship God when you're being faithful to your husband or your wife, right? You worship God when you are literally giving thanks to God when you literally just like talk to him and you don't even mention anything about you, but you just say, thank you, God, for who you are. Not for what you give me, but who you are. Because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't even have somebody that we can worship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, honestly, like, I was going to read John chapter 4, verse 24 says that God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And you don't need music to worship God in spirit and in truth. I mean, the music is helpful because it creates an atmosphere. It allows you to be able to do